Hello, I'm back. I took a few days off of reading and got some more books that I want to read, which I'm realizing is probably part of the vicious cycle of not finishing books. I'll start a book, get excited about reading, and then buy 3 more books that I really want to read, and then not want to finish the book I'm reading because I'm so excited about the other book. So, I'm committed. We are halfway through this book. I really like it. We're reading Ursula K LeGuin's No Time to Spare. And we are on Utopia Yin, Utopia Yang, April 2015. Just gonna keep going until the end, and then we get to read a different book. That's the deal. Okay. Utopia Yin, Utopia Yang, April 2015. There are some thoughts about utopia and dystopia, the old, crude, good places where compensatory visions of controlling what you couldn't control and having what you didn't have here and now. An orderly, peaceful heaven, a paradise of pie in the sky. Horse? I don't know what that word is. The way to them was clear but drastic. You died. Thomas More's secular and intellectual construct utopia was still an expression of desire for something lacking here and now, rational human control of human life. But his good place was explicitly no place, only in the head, a blueprint without a building site. Ever since, utopia has been located not in the afterlife, but just off the map, across the ocean, over the mountains, in the future, or on another planet, a livable yet unattainable elsewhere. Every utopia since utopia has also been, clearly or obscurely, actually or possibly, in the author's or in the reader's judgment, both a good place and a bad one. Every utopia contains a dystopia. Every dystopia contains a utopia. In the yang-yin symbol, each half contains within it a portion of the other, signifying their complete interdependence and continual intermutability. The figure is static, but each half contains the seed of transformation. The symbol represents not a stasis, but a process. It may be useful to think of utopia in terms of this long-lived Chinese symbol, particularly if one is willing to forego the usual masculinist assumption that yang is superior to yin, and instead consider the interdependence and intermutability of the two as the essential feature of the symbol. Yang or yang is male, bright, dry, hard, active, penetrating. Yin is feminine, dark, wet, easy, receptive, containing. Yang is in control, yin acceptance. They are great and equal powers. Neither can exist alone, and each is always in process of becoming the other. Both utopia and dystopia are often an enclave of maximum control surrounded by a wilderness, as in Butler's Erewhon, E.M. Forster's The Machine Stops, and Vangi Zamyatin's We. Good citizens of utopia consider the wilderness dangerous, hostile, unlivable. To an adventurous or rebellious dystopian, it represents change and freedom. In this, I see examples of the intermutability of yang and yin, the dark, mysterious wilderness surrounding a bright, safe place, the bad places, which then become the good place, the bright, open future surrounding a dark, closed prison, or vice versa. In the last half-century, this pattern has been repeated, perhaps to exhaustion, variations on the theme becoming more and more predictable or merely arbitrary. Notable exceptions to the pattern are Huxley's Brave New World, a dystopia in which the wilderness has been reduced to an enclave so completely dominated by the intensely controlled young world state, that any hope of its offering freedom or change is illusory. In Orwell's 1984 appeared a dystopia in which the yin element has been totally eliminated by the yang, appearing only in the receptive obedience of the controlled masses and as manipulated delusions of wilderness and freedom. Yang, the dominator, always seeks to deny its dependence on yin. Huxley and Orwell uncompromisingly present the outcome of successful denial. Through psychological and political control, these dystopias have achieved a non-dynamic stasis that allows no change. The balance is immovable. One side up, the other side down. Everything is yang forever. Where is the yin dystopia? Is it perhaps in post-Holocaust stories and horror fiction with its shambling herds of zombies, the increasingly popular visions of social breakdown, total loss of control, chaos, and old night? Yang perceives yin only as negative, inferior, bad, and yang has always been given the last word, but there is no last word. At present we seem only to write dystopias. Perhaps in order to be able to write a utopia, you need to think yinly. I tried to write one in Always Coming Home. Did I succeed? In a yin utopia, a contradiction in terms, since all the familiar utopias rely on control to make them work, and yin does not control, yet it is a great power. How does it work? I can only guess. My guess is that the kind of thinking we are at least beginning to do about how to change the goals of human domination and unlimited growth to those of human adaptability and long-term survival is a shift from yang to yin, and so involves acceptance of impermanence and imperfection, a patience with uncertainty and the makeshift, a friendship with water, darkness, and the earth. Sounds great. The Annals of Pard. Pard's her cat, remember? The Trouble, January 2013. I've never had a cat before who directly challenged me. I don't look for much obedience from a cat. The relationship isn't based on rank or dominance hierarchy as with dogs, and cats have no guilt and very little shame. I expect a cat to steal food left out on the counter, knowing perfectly well that he'll be swatted if caught. Greed, and possibly the joy of theft, overrides the slight fear. Stupid human me to leave food out on the counter. I expect a cat who has been scolded or swatted for getting up on the dining table to get up on the dining table and leave little footprints all over it because he sees no reason to refrain from doing so when I'm not in the room. When found later, the evidence of the little footprints will have passed the statute of limitations. To make any sense to the cat, retaliation for wrongdoing must be immediate. The cat knows that as well as I do, which is why I expect him to do wrong while I'm not in the room and don't expect him to do wrong while I am. To do wrong under my very eyes strains our relationship. It demands scolding, swatting, shouting, flight, pursuit, commotion. It is a challenge, a deliberate invitation to trouble. And this is where Pard is different from the many and various cats who have companioned me. They were all like me. They wanted to avoid trouble. Pard wants to make it. He isn't a troublesome cat. His hygiene is impeccable. He's gentle. He never steals food. To be sure, this is only because he doesn't recognize anything but kibbled cat food as food. I can leave the pork cutlets on the counter while he's waiting hungrily for his quarter cup of dinner kibbles, and he won't even get up to sniff them. I put up a piece of bacon on top of his kibbles, and he would eat them and leave it. I could lay a fillet of sole down on him, and he would shake it off with contempt and go away. He challenges me by doing what he's forbidden to do, and I guess there really aren't a lot of things he's forbidden, besides jumping up on the mantel and knocking off the cachinas. He isn't allowed to get on the dining table, but there's nothing to do but leave footprints. The mantle, which is a really big jump even for Pard, is the only unprotected display place left in the house for small ornamental things. All the others have found safe havens unreachable even by airborne cats. So jumping up on the mantle has become his goal, his challenge. But only if I am in the room. He'll spend all day in the living room and never look at the fireplace until I come in. A while after we've both been there, Pard begins to glance at the mantelpiece. His eyes get rounder and blacker. He wanders carelessly about on a chair arm, aloud, or a side table, aloud, near the fireplace. He stands up on his hind legs to sniff a lampshade or the top of the fire screen, though very thoroughly with enormous interest, always a little closer to the mantelpiece. Till usually, when I'm not looking, but not quite not looking, he's airborne and up on the mantel knocking something off. Then scolding, shouting, flight, pursuit, etc., treble. Mission accomplished. Recently, there's an added element, the squirt bottle. As soon as he looks at the mantel, I pick up the squirt bottle. The first couple times when he made ready to jump on to the mantel and I squirted him, he was totally taken aback. He didn't even associate the squirt with the bottle, but he does now. But it merely adds a new flavor, a new spice to the trouble. It doesn't keep him off the mantel. I gave in a couple of days ago and moved all the little kachinas to a haven, leaving only the two big ones and some outstanding rocks. But this morning, while I was doing downward dog with my back turned, Pard jumped up onto the mantel and knocked off the lump of Tibetan turquoise, taking a chip out of it when it hit the hearth. The ensuing trouble was pretty intense, although I never could get anywhere near close enough to swat him. He knew I was mad. He has been terribly polite ever since, and inclined to fall over and wave his paws in an innocently endearing manner. He'll go on that way till we're all in the living room this evening and the need for trouble arises in him again. So this little cat, so deeply shaped by human expectation, the tamest cat I ever had, has a flame of absolute willful wildness. I'm sure some of it's the boredom factor, a young cat with old people, an indoors cat, but Pard doesn't have to be an indoors cat, he chooses to. The cat flap is open for him all through daylight, at his request or at our suggestion. Sometimes he goes out onto the deck, looks down at the garden, bird watches for a few minutes, and comes back. Or he may go out and turn right around and come back. Or he may say, "Oh, no thanks, it's very large out there and quite cold this time of year, so I think I'll stand here halfway out the flap for a while and then back in." What he doesn't do is stay out. When the weather warms up and we're outside too, he will, but not enthusiastically. He'll go out and go down and eat some kind of grass that makes him throw up and come back indoors and throw it up on the rug. That isn't troublemaking, it's just cat being. There is no moral to the story and no conclusion. Wish me luck with the squirt bottle. My cat's been doing this too lately, where she's obsessed with eating grass, but she can't digest it, and so there's this constant trouble, just like in this book, of us letting her out into the backyard, her eating grass, us chasing her, and her looking like, "I wasn't eating grass, what are you talking about?" and then trying to go eat grass as soon as we look away. It's pretty hilarious and frustrating. Okay. Pard and the Time Machine, May 2014. People who think of me as a sci-fi writer will not be surprised to hear that there is a time machine in my study. So far it hasn't transported me among the Eloi and the Morlocks or back among the dinosaurs. Fine with me. I'll take the time I got, thanks. All my time machine does is save stuff from my computer and provide interest and occupation to my cat. In Pard's first year with us, he spent a lot of time on beetles because we had a lot of them. The box elder beetle is now endemic in Portland, having shifted its allegiance from box elders, which we don't have, to big leaf maples, which we have lots of. And so we have beetles who live under the siding boards of the house and breed and swarm and creep and seep impossibly through non-existent crevices of the window frames into the house, where they mass on sunlit windows and blunder about infuriatingly, getting under pillows and papers and feet and into everything, including cups of tea and Charles's ears. Ew! Mostly they crawl, but they fly when alarmed. They are rather pretty little beetles and harmless, but intolerable because, like us, there are too many of them for their own good. Pard used to see them as animated kibbles and enjoyed the chase, the pounce, the crunch, but evidently they weren't as tasty as meow mix or dental greenies, and anyhow, enough beetles is enough. Now he ignores them as steadfastly as we do, or try to. But back then, when the time machine made its little clicky-whirry insect-like internal noises, he was sure that it contained or concealed beetles, and spent a good deal of time trying to get inside. It is 7.5 inches square and 1.5 inches high, white plastic, fortunately very tough white plastic, well and tightly sealed all around and quite heavy for its size. All his efforts barely scratched the surface. As it continued to resist him and his interest in beetles cooled, he stopped trying to open the time machine. He discovered that it offered other possibilities. Its normal temperature is high, quite warm to the hand, and I think it gets hotter when performing its secret and mysterious connective operations in putative virtuality, or the clouds of unknowing, or wherever it is it saves stuff. My study, being half windows, is drafty and sometimes pretty cold in winter. As he came out of airborne youth and began to spend more time lying around near me in the study, Pard, being a cat, found the warm place. He's there right now, although today, the last day of April, my thermometer says it's 77 degrees and rising. He is sound asleep. About 1/5 of him is right on top of the time machine. The rest of him, paws and so on, spills over to the desktop, partly onto a lovely soft alpaca Mobius scarf a kind reader sent me with a prescient note that said, "If you don't need this, I hope your cat will like it." And partly on a little wool fetish bear mat from the Southwest that a friend gave me. I never had a chance at the scarf. I opened the package at my desk. Pard came over and appropriated the scarf without a word. He dragged it a few inches away from me, lay down, and began to knead it, looking dreamy and purring softly till he went to sleep. It was his scarf. The mat arrived later and was adopted as promptly. He sat on it. The cat sat on the mat. His mat, no argument. So the mat and the scarf lie on the desk, right by the warm time machine, and the cat distributes himself daily among the three of them and purrs and sleeps. The other use he may have found for the time machine is purely, to me, speculative. It involves dematerialization. Pard doesn't go outside often or stay long unless one of us is with him. He can't sleep outside, can barely lie down and half relax. He remains stimulated, watchful, and jumpy. He has indoors and those who share it with him pretty well under his paw, but he knows that outdoors is way beyond his knowledge or control. He's not at home there. Wise little cat. So when now and then he vanishes, I don't much worry about his having somehow got out the back door and then found his cat flap locked. He's somewhere about the house. But sometimes the disappearance goes on, and there is no Pard anywhere outside or in. He is not in the basement or the dark attic or in the closet or a cupboard or under the bedspread. He is not. He has dematerialized. I get anxious and call his his food call, tiki tiki tiki, and rattle the can of greenies in an alluring fashion that would ordinarily bring him straight up or down the stairs without touching paw to stair. Silence. Absence. No cat. I tell myself to stop fretting, and Charles tells me to stop fretting, and I attempt or pretend to stop fretting and go on with whatever I'm doing, fretting. The sense of mystery is constant and oppressive. And then, there he is. He has rematerialized before my eyes, and there he is, with his tail curved over his back and a bland, friendly expression suggesting permanent readiness for food. Pard, where were you? Silence. Affable presence, mystery. I think he uses the time machine. I think it takes him elsewhere. Not cyberspace, that's no place for cats. Maybe he uses it to open temporal interstices, like the impossible window frame non-spaces by which box elder beetles enter the house. By such secret ways, known to Bastet and Li Shu, lit by the stars of Leo, he visits that mysterious realm, the great outdoors, where he is safe and perfectly at home. Yay! I like the idea of having a time machine. That's all. Part 3, trying to make sense of it. I'm going to read at least one more chapter, then we'll see. A Band of Brothers, A Stream of Sisters, November 2010. I have come to see male group solidarity as an immensely powerful force in human affairs, more powerful perhaps than the feminism of the late 20th century took into account. It's amazing, given their different physiology and complement of hormones, how much alike men and women are in most ways. Still, it seems to be the fact that women on the whole have less direct competitive drive and desire to dominate, and therefore paradoxically have less need to bond with one another in ranked exclusive groups. The power of male group solidarity must come from the control and channeling of male rivalry, the repression and concentration of the hormone-driven will to dominate that so often dominates men themselves. It is a remarkable reversal. The destructive, anarchic energy of individual rivalry and competitive ambition is diverted into loyalty to group and leader and directed to more or less constructive social enterprise. Such groups are closed, positing the other as outsider. They exclude first women, then men of a different age, or kind, or caste, or nation, or level of achievement, etc. Exclusions that reinforce the solidarity and power of the excluders. Perceiving any threat, the band of brothers joins together to present an impermeable front. Male solidarity appears to me to have been the prime shaper of most of the great ancient institutions of society: government, army, priesthood, university, and the new one that may be devouring all the others, corporation. The existence and dominance of these hierarchic, organized, coherent, durable institution goes back so far and has been so nearly universal that it's mostly just called how things are, or the world, or division of labor, or history, or God's will, etc. As for female solidarity, without it, human society, I think, would not exist. But it remains all but invisible to men, history, and God. Female solidarity might better be called fluidity, a stream of river rather than a structure. The only institutions I am fairly sure it has played some part in shaping are the tribe and that very amorphous thing, the family. Wherever the male arrangement of society permits the fellowship of women on their own terms, it tends to be casual, unformulated, unhierarchical, to be ad hoc rather than fixed, flexible rather than rigid, and more collaborative than competitive. That it has mostly operated in the private rather than the public sphere is a function of the male control of society, the male definition and separation of public and private. It's hard to know if women's groups would ever gather into great centers because the relentless pressure from male institutions against such aggregation has prevented it. It might not happen anyhow. Instead of rising from the rigorous control of aggression in the pursuit of power, the energy of female solidarity comes from the wish and need for mutual aid and often the search for freedom from oppression. Elusiveness is the essence of fluidity. So when the interdependence of women is perceived as a threat to the dependence of women on men, and the childbearing, child-rearing, family-serving, man-serving role assigned to women, it's easy to declare that it simply doesn't exist. Women have no loyalty, do not understand what friendship is, etc. Denial is an effective weapon in the hands of fear. The idea of female independence and interdependence is met with scoffing hatred by both men and women who see themselves as benefiting from male dominance. Misogyny is by no means limited to men. Living in a man's world, plenty of women distrust and fear themselves as much or more than men do. Insofar as the feminism of the 1970s played on fear exalting the independence and interdependence of women, it was playing with fire. We cried, "Sisterhood is powerful," and they believed us. Terrified misogynists of both sexes were howling that the house was burning down before most feminists found out where the matches were. The nature of sisterhood is so utterly different from the power of brotherhood that it's hard to predict how it might change society. In any case, we've only seen a glimpse of what its effects may be. The great ancient male institutions have been increasingly infiltrated by women for the last 2 centuries, and this is a very great change. But when women manage to join the institutions that excluded them, they mostly end up being co-opted by them, serving male ends, enforcing male values, which is why I have a problem with women in combat in the armed services, and why I watch the rise of women in the great universities and the corporations, even the government, with an anxious eye. Can women operate as women in a male institution without becoming imitation men? If so, they will change the institution so radically that the men are likely to label it second class, lower the pay, and abandon it. This has happened to some extent in several fields, such as the practice of teaching and medicine, increasingly in the hands of women. But the management of those fields, the power and definition of their aims, still belongs to men. The question remains open. As I look back on the feminism of the late 20th century, I see it as typical of feminine solidarity. All Indians, no chiefs. It was an attempt to create an unhierarchical, inclusive, flexible, collaborative, unstructured, ad hoc body of people to bring the genders together in a better balance. Women who want to work toward that end need, I think, to recognize and respect their own elusive, invaluable, indestructible kind of solidarity, as do men. And they need to recognize both the great value of male solidarity and the inferiority of gender solidarity to human solidarity, as do men. I think feminism continues and will continue to exist wherever women work in their own way with one another and with men, and wherever women and men go on questioning male definitions of value, refusing gender exclusivity, affirming interdependence, distrusting aggression, seeking freedom always. And on that note, I'm going to close for today, and we'll pick up in the next section. Hope you're enjoying this book. We'll start back up at exorcists. Cheerful topic. Talk to you soon.